Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. First four games, time to do a little check-in on the Oregon Ducks. This is a team that we talked about a lot during the offseason, had really high expectations for this team. And through the first four games, they've certainly met those expectations and some. Excited to get into what we've seen on the defensive side of the ball and a little bit on the offensive side too. Before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys and especially the Oregon fans. This has been a team we've loved talking about. The direction of this program under Dan Lanning, the boys are fired up about. Appreciate y'all rocking with the boys. If you do enjoy the content, again, consider subscribing to the channel. But more importantly, best part about doing this, learning from you guys, talking ball with you guys in the comment section. So let us know how you guys are feeling. Dill, going to kick this one off to you. I want to start on the defensive side of the ball. I feel like coming into the season, Bo Nix, Troy Franklin, really good offensive line. We knew that group would be good. We said if this Oregon team wants to be special in 2023, it's got to take some steps on the defensive side of the ball. And so far, I think you certainly have seen that.
And honestly, I think people do still underrate how difficult it is to come in as a first-year defensive coach, at least. I mean, when you have an offense, you have the quarterback, you have the wide receivers, just like what you frankly saw with Oregon last year, you can score the football. I mean, that's just not – it just isn't – I guess what you can do is have a little more hero ball. Like, you just need a couple really good players. On defense, you need all 11 playing really good, and you need them all playing in sync. And honestly, last year they just really weren't for Oregon. And this year, again, the breakdowns in the secondary and the physicality up front and some of those things that just were sort of missing, they feel like they're starting to come together a little bit.
100%. And I think that's an interesting conversation. You look at some other defensive-minded head coaches, their first year as head coaches coming from defensive coordinator spots. There's been some growing pains. You can go back to Kirby Smart, defensive coordinator at Alabama, takes his job at Georgia. The defense struggled year one. Brent Venables last year, the defensive coordinator at Clemson, considered one of the best, if not the best in the country, really struggled on the defensive side of the ball. And I think, quite frankly, you saw that with Dan Lanning as well year one. This year, though, night and day difference. And on my note sheet, kind of went back, watching some games, taking some notes. It starts with the pass rush. And you got to give the Oregon fans an assist on this one. All offseason, we were talking about the secondary's got to come together. You look at the numbers from last year, you watch some games. We were critical of the secondary. What do the Oregon fans say? Hey, we got to get our pass rush going. And you go back and watch, and they were all right. This is a group up front that just did not generate pressure like they needed to, kind of leaving the secondary out to dry in 2022. Still, the most important stat from this Oregon defense in my mind, 10.16% sack rate. They are sacking the quarterback 10% of dropbacks. That is night and day. You saw it against Colorado. You saw it against Texas Tech. 7 sacks against Colorado. I get that offensive line's not great, but you saw that front four for Oregon dominate. For me, that's exactly where it starts, up front, and this defensive line absolutely getting after it.
And they've added some good pieces, and we saw that. And frankly, not necessarily an ad, but a guy you get back from injury in Popo Movi, he's dominating football games. And frankly, Taki Taimani has picked up his game. And to me, it starts and stops with those two up the middle, because right now, those two, they're pushing pockets, they're collapsing pockets, and they're winning up front. And again, I think the edge play is coming along. I love what you're seeing from Mateo Yu, frankly. And I think he's kind of worked his way into me looking like the guy who should kind of be the full-time starter on that edge spot. But I'm loving, honestly, it starts with me with Taki and Popo. What they're doing up front is just a night and day difference in terms of the physicality and kind of setting the attitude and the tone.
You could throw in a laundry list of guys, and I think that's what you're seeing is not only the first line talent, but the depth of this defensive line. You look back to that Colorado game, it was a legitimate party in the backfield. You had true freshman Mateo Yu, Blake Purchase getting involved. Obviously, Jordan Birch, he's been really, really good. Brandon Dorless, the list goes on and on. You could have I have 7 names on that defensive line that I marked down from that Colorado game. Probably not even enough. Starts with the defensive line, a massive improvement. Still, the next spot, and we'll just kind of work through here. And the linebacker play on paper going into last year, that's what everyone was banging the table. Noah Sewell, Justin Flo, 2 5-stars. And again, I've been critical in the past. I'm not trying to rag on those guys. Noah Sewell off in the NFL now. Those guys, they just didn't put it together. We saw the talent. You saw the athleticism flash, They didn't quite put it together. You're seeing these linebackers, especially when it's operating in space, making tackles in space. I mean, this is a night and day difference from that linebacker play than what you saw last year.
And they're just playing like they're making the plays they should make. And I think the issue that stands out to me in the stats you see is the lack of tackles you just saw from that linebacker spot. Yeah. I mean, for those two not to be kind of leading the way in tackles and having the stats they did, it's not even close to be enough. But right now Hill and Bossa are just playing really good football. They're getting to the spot on time and quickly and not like you don't see them chasing guys as much as you saw last year. So again, I think that might be not just maybe those two players being better or whatever else, but it might just be a little bit more comfortability with what Dan Lanning's trying to do.
It definitely might be that, but I mean, especially with Justin Flo, like I think it came with just not playing that many snaps, like really battling injuries his whole career. Like the instincts just weren't there. Like when you saw you could move around the field and like hit a body if he needed to, he was lost. I mean, blown assignments, completely lost on some of these plays. These linebackers are not lost. They're faster, they're better in space, and they're fitting gaps like it should. And you look at the secondary, you lose Christian Gonzalez, who if you follow like our conversation in the NFL draft, my cornerback one, being a baller for the New England Patriots. I don't think it's crazy to say this secondary group has also gotten better. I think they've gotten better at all three phases.
No, and right now this secondary is playing better, and frankly, it goes again to it wasn't necessarily a lack of talent in my eyes. It was just why were you seeing guys running open constantly? You're just not seeing it right now. Even against a Texas Tech team that I think wanted to spread the ball, it really wasn't a big issue in terms of like not covering guys. I mean, they had some snafus with penalties and
Kyrie Jackson that one play.
Oh but like God. You're not seeing that issue of guys running 10 yards free in the middle of the field, just wide open. That to me is what's been cleaned up. And again, you have talented guys like Kyrie Jackson looks really good. I love what Evan Williams does. I mean, in terms of being a guy who can play in the box and play in space and get his sacks, he kind of is that catch-all safety. And I think he's playing some really good ball, but honestly, it just feels like the unit's operating at a much higher level.
I think it's like twofolds. One, I think Dan Lanning went and got his guys. I mean, all of the guys that he was playing with last year at the back end, like those were guys from Mario Cristobal's regime. Now, you look at most of the starters back there. I mean, Jaleel Florence, that was Dan Lanning. I mean, true freshman when Dan Lanning took over. Evan Williams, Tasheem Johnson, Kyrie Jackson, all Dan Lanning's guys from the transfer portal. It's an experienced group, but it's also a very talented group. And a guy like Kyrie Jackson, shout out the boy, because he had a tough game against Texas Tech, made some stupid plays, nails. Against the defensive line, you don't want to overreact. Like that Colorado offensive line ain't great. I mean, Oregon, did what they needed and what we expected them to do. This secondary, and they had their hands full. Those are legit good wide receivers out in Colorado, and it was lockdown. Like the only stuff they could get going was underneath when kind of Oregon was playing back in those third and longs. When Oregon was tested down the field by those Colorado wide receivers, I mean, straight up clamps. I don't even think Jaleel Florence on the other side was even thrown at, and Kyrie Jackson was just absolutely shut down. This defense, meaningfully better than what we've seen.
The only thing I want to see more from this defense, I think they have the personnel to like play a little bit more aggressive, frankly. And I thought against Texas Tech, they did feel at times a little passive when they rushed three and they just let Tyler Shuck sit back there and do. Again, he wasn't like piecing them up, but like take off and run with it. Like when they were sending heat, when they were sending guys like Evan Williams or those backers who, again, are versatile players. I think they can play in the box, they can play in space. So I think you can use that to your advantage and go try to get the quarterback. Because that when they were doing that against Texas Tech, they were getting their sacks, they were creating negative plays, and then I felt at times they went into like a little bit more of a passive shell. And they got chunked a little bit. But I think this defense could crank it up a little bit and play a little bit like that suffocating ball that they played against Colorado. And I get it. That front four dominated. But honestly, I thought there was aggression across the field. I thought they were timing up blitzes and doing a good job with that. And I thought that made a big difference, frankly, in that game.
Yeah, and they have the personnel on the back end and be like, yeah, we can put a little confidence in you guys and send some heat. Like they have the talent to match up with some of these wide receivers. You have to look at the offense too. I mean, this is a team that's top 5 in the country, scoring 44 points per game, 7.2 yards per play. That's also top 10 in the country. Bo Nix in absolute command, right? You're not seeing the turnovers, almost a 70% or a 78% completion percentage. When I look at this Oregon offense, the first thing I think of and what I love about this team, why I think it can be special, is balance. I mean, they can piece you up through there. They got legit wide receivers. Troy Franklin, I seriously think is a first-round wide receiver. Gary Bryant, Tez Johnson, Trayshawn Holden, really talented group. I throw in Terrence Ferguson there too. I think he's a really good tight end. They can piece you up through the air if you kind of want to play a heavy box. If you want to give them a light box, I mean, they can pound the rock too. This offensive line, although lost some guys, I think is arguably better than you saw last year. And Bucky Irving, although 190 pounds, dude, he runs the rock like he's 220.
I don't get how he like sneaks out of some of those like piles. And you just see him take off. It's like, I mean, and honestly, he looks like a 190 pounder in space. So it's like he runs like he's 240 when he's in the box, and when he needs to go make a play in space, he looks like a 190-pound scat back. So just feels like almost the perfect wideout. And I think the biggest thing for me is like Troy Franklin, you just can't leave one-on-one. Because when he's one-on-one, you just throw the vertical, and him and Bo Nix are so in tune with that route. They're killing teams with it, and you need to play somebody over the top, which again I do think helps this running game. It's like you got to pick
if you want to play someone, if you want to like have a boundary corner and then have a safety kind of cheat to Troy Franklin, like you're leaving the middle of the field for a guy like Tez Johnson, who, although my height and weight, like dude's lightning. So he's phenomenal with the ball in his hands. They're really well-rounded. Like they have that true wide receiver one in Troy Franklin. They have like some true guys who are really good after the catch as well. And the offensive line, I mean, we had some questions there. They were losing a lot of production. Shout out Coach Terry, the young offensive line coach at Oregon, former Wake Forest alum. Shout out the boys. Doing a great job. I think he's doing a phenomenal job. The one thing you want to ut down on is the pre-snap penalties. You saw some.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like they maybe make some young guy mistakes, but what you have is a far more, physical offensive line than what they had last year. And they're moving people more than they did last year. Again, like, do they give up a little bit of pressure at times? Maybe, but I do think this offense line as a whole, they're playing a much more physical, heavy game, and I do think that. Again, that's kind of helped free up that passing attack because you just can't not play with guys over the top, and you really do have to pick your poison because the balance, you could just see it against Colorado was such a huge problem. They had no answers because was like there's nothing you can really do. If you can't like just line up and stop Troy Franklin, you got to play over the top, and then Bucky Irving has a game. So I don't know exactly how you stop this offense, but
that's what makes it so special. It's just such a complete offense. It'll hurt you in both ways. And like I said, Round Out was saying, like this offensive line, and this is no rag on last year's group, a lot of veterans. It was a phenomenal group last year. They ran the ball like nobody else in the country. This is a more talented group up front. Like you have some guys like Josh Conley Jr., the pre-snap penalties, Johnny Cornelius, like there's some growing pains there. But those guys are like legit top 50, top 100 NFL draft picks. And you see that in terms of how they move bodies and how they operate in space as athletes. This is a team that is, I think, more dangerous than we thought coming in. And we thought this team was pretty damn dangerous coming into the year.
Well, we knew the offense was going to be incredible. And honestly, the defense looks like it's kind of rounding into what they need to be to complement what they're going to do offensively. And I think you thought
you're going to see some battles. So when we went in depth to this Washington team last week, this Washington team is legit really good too. You know how we feel about USC. Pac-12 is absolutely loaded. We are in for some phenomenal games later on in the season. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. Would love to hear your takes in the comment section. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.